Why did I let it go this far? Watching everything I worked for crumble, and still wondering where I went wrong. My name is Valerie Mitchell, and at 25, I thought I had everything figured out, until one moment turned my entire world upside down. This is the story of how love, betrayal, and a single burning dress changed everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and the man I thought I was going to marry. But trust me, the truth is much darker than you'd expect. The soft hum of anticipation filled the air as I stood before the full-length mirror in the bridal suite, my wedding dress hanging like a promise of the future. It had taken 6 months to create, each stitch carefully sewn, each detail meticulously planned. The ivory satin gleamed under the soft lighting, and for a moment I allowed myself to savor the sheer perfection of it all. Today was supposed to be the culmination of years of dreams, the day I would marry Jason Wilson, the man I had come to believe was my forever. I had always imagined my wedding day would be a fairy tale. Growing up, I used to imagine walking down the aisle in a dress like this one, my father beside me, and a room full of people smiling at the happiness that would unfold. But today, as I looked at myself in that dress, I realized it wasn't just about the dress. It was about the life I had built, the choices I had made, and the people I had allowed into that life. But none of those people had prepared me for what was about to happen. The door to the bridal suite opened with a soft creak, and I turned to see my mother-in-law-to-be, Margaret Wilson, stepping into the room. Her heels clicked sharply against the hardwood floor, a sound that seemed too loud in the otherwise hushed room. She was always impeccably dressed, her blonde hair styled to perfection, her makeup flawless. But today, as I watched her enter, there was something about her that made me uneasy, something that wasn't quite right. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tightening in my chest. She had been distant and cold in the months leading up to the wedding, but I had hoped that today would be different. She gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I just wanted to check on things," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness that made my skin crawl. My bridesmaids were chatting in the background, but they quickly quieted when Margaret entered. I caught a glance of their concerned faces, but I didn't have time to process it. The atmosphere shifted, and I could feel the tension between us growing thicker by the second. "How are you feeling, dear?" Margaret asked, her gaze sweeping over me in a way that made my stomach twist. "I'm fine," I said, though I wasn't sure if I was convincing myself or her. I took a deep breath. "Everything's going perfectly, don't you think?" She glanced at the dress with a raised eyebrow, her lips curling into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't been so tightly controlled. "Perfect, you say?" she asked, her tone dipping into something darker. "Are you sure you're making the right choice, Valerie? Marrying into our family, it's not as simple as you think." I froze, a chill creeping up my spine. What did she mean by that? "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Margaret stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Jason is a Wilson. You're not. And you'll never be enough for him. Not with your background." The words stung, cutting deeper than I had anticipated. My background. I wasn't ashamed of my past, my small-town roots, my community college education, my hard work to make something of myself. But to her, it was never enough. Jason had been the one to encourage me, to lift me up, but in that moment, it felt like the weight of her disapproval was pushing me down. "I've worked hard for everything I've earned," I said, my voice trembling slightly but strong enough to hold my ground. "I'm not just a nobody." Margaret's smile was tight, almost mocking. "We'll see," she said, turning away with an air of finality. "Jason needs someone who understands his world, someone who knows the right people, comes from the right family, not someone who needs to make it on their own." I watched her leave the room, my heart racing. The silence that followed felt suffocating. What was she really trying to say? Was she warning me? Or was she testing me? I looked at myself in the mirror again, but this time it wasn't the dress that stood out, it was the uncertainty settling in my chest. Could I truly belong in this world with this family, or was I just a temporary fixture in a place I would never be accepted? My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I fumbled for it, almost dropping it in my haste. It was a message from Jason. "Are you ready, babe? I can't wait to see you." His words brought a surge of warmth, a reminder of why I was here. I was here for him. He was the one who had chosen me, who had promised to stand by me no matter what. In that moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to hold on to that love, to hold on to him. But then a part of me couldn't shake off Margaret's words. Could she be right? Would Jason eventually tire of me, of who I was, and of the life I had built? Could I live up to the impossible expectations she seemed to have for me? I glanced at the door, where Margaret had left moments before. Was she really trying to protect Jason from making a mistake, or was she simply trying to tear us apart before we even had a chance to start? I didn't have time to dwell on the questions swirling in my mind. The next few moments felt like they passed in a blur. There was no time for second guessing. Today was my day, and I couldn't afford to let anyone, especially Margaret, ruin it. I tried to refocus, smoothing my dress one last time as I took another deep breath. I could hear the faint sounds of the ceremony preparations in the background, the soft murmur of guests arriving, the sound of music being tested. Everything was falling into place, just as it should. But somehow, something in the air had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was just me being paranoid or if Margaret's words had struck a chord. "Everything okay in here?" Jessica, one of my bridesmaids, poked her head into the suite, her face a mix of concern and excitement. I forced a smile, trying to push the knot of anxiety in my stomach down. "Yeah, just a little nervous," I admitted, my voice betraying me. She smiled, stepping in and adjusting the veil on my head. "You're going to be fine. Jason is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Her words were meant to comfort, but in that moment they felt hollow, like a gentle mask over something much deeper. I nodded, though my thoughts kept wandering back to Margaret, to the things she had said. Could I be enough for Jason? Could I ever truly belong in his world, or was this all just a dream that was about to be shattered? Before I could answer, there was a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, but when I opened it, I found Jason's father standing there, his face serious. "Valerie, there's something you need to see," he said, his voice low. My pulse quickened as I followed him into the hallway, unsure of what was happening, but already feeling the first stirrings of dread. And then, just like that, the world I had worked so hard to build began to unravel. As I stepped into the hallway, the tension thickened in the air, the uneasy feeling from before tightening in my chest. Jason's father, Richard, didn't say another word as he led me down the corridor. The muted sounds of the ceremony hall grew fainter with each step we took, as if they were being swallowed by the walls around us. I could feel my breath shallow, my heartbeat quickening with every footfall. What was happening? Why had Richard come to find me like this? We reached the end of the hallway, and my mind raced, trying to piece together any clues. I was barely holding on to my composure, the fragile calm I had built starting to crack under the weight of the unknown. Richard stopped in front of the bridal suite door and glanced back at me. His expression was grim, his lips pressed into a tight line, and for the first time I felt an uneasy connection between us. He knew something I didn't. "Richard? What's going on?" I managed to ask, my voice sounding too small in the vast silence of the hall. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gave a sharp nod toward the door. "You should see for yourself." I pushed open the door, my heart in my throat, and then I saw it. There, in the center of the room, the dress, the beautiful ivory satin dress that had taken so long to perfect, was nothing more than a smoldering heap. My wedding dress. The dress that had once symbolized all the joy and anticipation of my future with Jason, now lay in ashes, the flames still licking at the fabric. The scent of smoke and burnt silk hung heavily in the air, stinging my eyes and my throat. I stood frozen, unable to speak for a long moment. The world around me seemed to fall away, the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears drowning out everything else. My gaze moved from the ruined dress to the figure standing near the window, Margaret. Her face was twisted with a strange mixture of anger and satisfaction, and she was holding a lighter in her hand, the metal gleaming coldly in the light. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time I saw a flicker of triumph in them. "You've ruined it," I whispered, my voice barely audible as I took a step forward, my feet feeling like lead. Margaret didn't flinch. "It's for the best, Valerie," she said, her tone smooth but cutting. "You're not good enough for Jason. You're from the wrong side of town. He deserves someone from our world, someone who knows how to fit in with our family. Her words stung more than the flames that had just consumed my dress. You'll never belong here, she continued, her voice rising with that familiar, condescending edge. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, but I couldn't. There was too much confusion, too much disbelief choking my throat. Why was she doing this? Why was she trying to ruin everything? Margaret, why? I managed, my voice shaky now, but still trying to hold on to some semblance of control. She just smiled, the look on her face almost pitying. Because Jason deserves someone who can elevate him, someone who understands the right circles, someone who won't embarrass him with a community college education. Her words were venomous, each one cutting deeper into the core of my being. You have no place here, Valerie, you never did. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. Every word felt like a slap. But there was something else I couldn't ignore. The hurt I was feeling was nothing compared to the anger beginning to swell inside me. How dare she think she could control my life? How dare she try to dictate who I was supposed to be? Jason was my choice, not hers. But more than that, I could hear the whispers of doubt she had planted in my mind. Was I really enough for him? Could I really fit into his world? Or had I been fooling myself all along? The question hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a fleeting moment I felt a crack in my confidence. Could I overcome this? Could I stand up to her and prove everyone, including myself, wrong? But then, I remembered Jason. I thought of the man I had fallen in love with, the one who had promised me, time and time again, that none of this mattered, that we were enough, just as we were. Before I could process everything further, my phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me out of the moment. I reached for it instinctively, my hands trembling as I unlocked the screen. It was a live feed from the ceremony space. The cameras were still rolling. The guests were starting to file in, the soft rustle of people talking filling the background. And there, in the corner of the screen, was Jason, waiting, with a look of impatience mixed with nervous excitement. He was ready for me. Jason, I whispered under my breath, my heart aching at the sight of him. He had no idea what had just happened. I turned toward Richard, my mind racing. We need to do something. This wedding, our wedding, can't end like this. Richard nodded grimly, but there was something in his eyes now, understanding, even regret. I'll take care of it, he said, his voice firm but laced with the weight of the situation. You need to go to him. He's waiting. I turned to the window, looking out at the venue. Everything that had seemed perfect was now in disarray. I could hear the faint sound of Jason's voice through the live stream, talking to the guests, trying to fill the silence as they waited for me to arrive. I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. He didn't deserve any of this. But more than that, something in me shifted. There was no way I was going to let Margaret win. There was no way I was going to let this ruin our day, our future together. I had worked too hard for this moment, too hard for everything I had built. I wasn't going to let anyone, least of all her, take that away from me. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I'll be fine, I said to Richard, my voice steadier now, a spark of determination flaring inside me. But the wedding is happening. It's happening for Jason. It's happening for us. As I moved toward the door, I took one last glance at the room. The charred remains of my dress, the remnants of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But I wasn't going to let it end here. I wouldn't let this woman's cruelty dictate my happiness. I walked down the hall, each step bringing me closer to the man I loved. The man who, despite everything, still believed in us. The ceremony was still waiting, and I was going to make sure we didn't just survive this day, we were going to thrive. As I made my way down the hallway, my mind raced, the weight of Margaret's words still echoing in my thoughts, but the closer I got to the ceremony, the clearer my purpose became. This day wasn't about Margaret. It wasn't about her judgment, her control, or her attempt to ruin everything. This day was about me and Jason, our love, our future. And no one, not even her, could take that from us. When I reached the door to the ceremony space, I hesitated for just a moment, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I couldn't afford to show the turmoil I was feeling. I had to be strong. I had to be myself. Jason was waiting for me. I wasn't going to let this mess define us. I pushed open the door, and immediately the soft murmur of the guests' voices filled the air. The venue, which had been set up with such care, now felt strangely empty. There were gaps in the seating where some guests had arrived late, others still making small talk, but what truly caught my attention was the look on Jason's face. His eyes locked onto mine the moment I entered, and a rush of emotions flooded through me. Relief, nervousness, and most of all, an overwhelming love. He was standing at the altar, his hands clenched at his sides, waiting for me. His tuxedo, usually crisp and flawless, now looked as if it had absorbed the stress of the day, his jaw tight, his brow furrowed. But when he saw me, his face softened. He didn't even seem to notice the wedding dress that wasn't my original gown, the one I had been so excited to wear. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. The atmosphere in the room shifted as well, the guests slowly quieting down, their eyes now focused on the two of us. Some looked confused, others curious, but there was a sense of collective anticipation in the air. For a brief second, I felt like I was the only one in the room. All that mattered was Jason, his eyes, his hands, his presence. "Jason," I said quietly, my voice trembling but resolute. The words came out so much more softly than I had intended, but they carried the weight of everything I had been holding inside. "I'm sorry, I never wanted this." Jason stepped toward me immediately, his hand reaching for mine, his grip warm and steady. "Val," he said, his voice full of concern, but also something else. "Relief? Love?" I couldn't be sure, but it was enough. "You don't have to apologize. We'll get through this, together." For a moment everything felt right again, the chaos, the confusion, the hurt, it seemed so far away. I could feel the warmth of his touch, and I knew that in that moment, nothing else mattered. We were in this together, no matter what. But then, as if on cue, the door to the bridal suite burst open behind me, and I knew before I turned around that it was Margaret. Her footsteps echoed sharply in the silence, and my breath hitched in my chest. "Jason," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness, "you can't seriously go through with this." I turned slowly to face her. She stood there, her eyes blazing with fury, her perfectly coiffed hair now slightly disheveled from earlier, and her lips twisted in a way that made my stomach tighten. In that moment, I could almost feel the waves of anger radiating off of her. "I've already made my decision, Mom," Jason replied, his voice steady but edged with frustration. "I'm marrying Valerie. This is our choice." I could see the flash of disbelief in Margaret's eyes. She wasn't used to being defied, least of all by her own son. She took a step closer, her gaze shifting from Jason to me. "You think you can marry her, Jason?" Margaret's voice was a mix of anger and condescension, like she was trying to remind him of something he had forgotten. "Do you honestly believe this is what's best for you? She's not from our world. She doesn't belong here. She's not one of us." The words hit like a slap, and I felt a pang deep in my chest. I wanted to scream at her, tell her she was wrong, that she didn't know me, that she didn't have the right to judge me. But more than that, I wanted to scream at myself, for doubting whether I was enough. Was I really the right choice for Jason? Could I really fit into a life that seemed so different from mine? But Jason didn't hesitate. His hand tightened around mine and he stepped forward, his jaw set in a way I hadn't seen before. There was no hesitation in his voice when he spoke. "I don't care what you think, Mom," he said, his voice strong, unwavering. "Valerie is who I want to be with, and nothing you say will change that." Margaret recoiled as though his words had physically struck her, her eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment she was speechless, her mouth opening and closing without sound, as though trying to process the enormity of what was happening. I wanted to say something, anything to help Jason, to show him how much his support meant to me. But before I could speak, Margaret found her voice again. "You've made a mistake, Jason," she hissed, her voice cold. "And you'll regret it, you'll see." Her words hung in the air, her eyes glaring at me with a mixture of loathing and spite. But Jason stood firm, his hands still clasped in mine, and I could see the determination in his eyes. The tension between Margaret and Jason was palpable, but I didn't look away. We had already come so far. Nothing, not even her, could tear us apart now. I squeezed Jason's hand, a silent promise that I wasn't going anywhere. Not today, not ever. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, until the sound of footsteps breaking through the tension startled me. It was Richard, Jason's father, stepping into the room with a calm, measured expression on his face. He had seen everything unfold, everything that had happened. And yet, there was something in his eyes that gave me hope. Maybe things could still be salvaged. "Margaret," Richard said softly, his voice carrying a weight of authority, "I think it's time for you to leave." Margaret's eyes widened in shock, but she didn't argue. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She glanced at Jason one last time, her face a mask of anger and betrayal, before turning sharply and walking out, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as she left. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, my body relaxing slightly. Jason's hand tightened around mine as he turned to me, his expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, trying to smile through the tension. "Yeah, I will be." Jason kissed my forehead gently, his touch reassuring, grounding me in the moment. "I love you, Valerie. Don't ever doubt that." "I don't," I said softly, the words coming from somewhere deep within. "I love you too." We turned back to face the room, where the guests had been watching in silence. There were no more questions, no more doubt. All that mattered now was the two of us. And as the ceremony continued, I knew that nothing, not even Margaret, could take away the love we had built. We were stronger than this, and we were going to get through it, together. The ceremony began again, but it felt different now. Jason's hand, warm and steady in mine, grounded me in a way I hadn't anticipated. As we stood there, ready to face what was left of our wedding, I couldn't shake the weight of everything that had just happened. Margaret's venomous words still echoed in my mind, but the overwhelming tide of Jason's unwavering support kept them at bay. For a moment, the room felt distant. The guests, their faces a blur, seemed almost secondary to the reality of what was happening. The grand venue, the beautiful decorations, and the wedding plans that had been meticulously crafted, it all seemed irrelevant in the face of the storm we had just weathered. But still, we stood here. We were still going to get married. And no one, not even Margaret, could take that away from us. Jason leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered, "You look stunning, Val. The dress doesn't matter. You're perfect, just as you are." I swallowed, the weight of his words filling my chest with warmth. I wasn't perfect, no one was. But in that moment, I realized what he meant. It wasn't about the dress. It wasn't about what Margaret thought or what anyone else expected. It was about our commitment to each other, the bond we shared. That was what mattered. That was the heart of our marriage. As the ceremony continued, the officiant, a kind man named Pastor Mitchell, gave us both a knowing glance, a silent acknowledgement of the tension that had just unfolded. But he didn't let it distract from the purpose of today. "We are gathered here today not just to witness a union, but to celebrate the strength of love, even in the face of adversity," he said, his voice rich with sincerity. "Jason and Valerie have already faced challenges together, and they have overcome them with grace and resilience." The words felt like a balm, soothing the rawness that had taken over my mind. Grace, resilience. Those were the qualities I needed to remember, the qualities that had gotten me through the hardest parts of my life. And now, as I stood here beside Jason, I realized they were the very things that would help us build a life together, despite the challenges that were bound to come. Jason took my hands in his gaze steady as he looked into my eyes. "Valerie," he began, his voice strong yet filled with emotion, "I promise to stand by you, to support you no matter what comes our way. Whether it's difficult family members, challenges from the world around us, or just the uncertainties of life, I will always choose you." The sincerity in his voice, the depth of his words, struck a chord deep within me. There was no question now, no lingering doubt. Jason had made his choice. And it was me. Not because of the dress I wore, not because of where I came from, but because we had something real, something that was stronger than any obstacle life could throw at us. Tears welled in my eyes as I squeezed his hands tighter, trying to steady myself. "And I promise to always stand by you, Jason," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. "I'll be with you, through everything. Through the highs and the lows, the good times and the bad. You're my home, and I'll always choose you." The moment hung between us, the words lingering in the air like a promise we both knew we would keep. The guests watched, some moved by the raw honesty of our vows, others perhaps realizing for the first time just how powerful the commitment we were making was. This wasn't just about a wedding, it was about a partnership, a bond that couldn't be broken by the opinions of others. Not Margaret. Not anyone. As Pastor Mitchell guided us through the rest of the ceremony, I noticed something incredible. The atmosphere had shifted. The tension that had once gripped the room seemed to dissipate, replaced by something warmer, more genuine. The guests who had been on edge now seemed to relax, their faces softening as they observed our vows. The divide that had once separated Jason's side of the family from mine, his privileged high society relatives and my more humble background, began to blur. It was as though in this moment they had all witnessed something deeper than the surface-level tensions. They had seen love in its purest form, a love that could weather any storm. A love that didn't need anyone's approval to exist. When it was time to exchange the rings, a slight moment of panic gripped Jason. His mother, of course, had taken the rings with her during the pre-ceremony preparations, and with her sudden departure, they were now nowhere to be found. Jason's face tightened as he scanned the room, looking for some kind of solution. But before he could say anything, his father stepped forward, producing a small, velvet box from his pocket. "I took the liberty of retrieving these earlier," he said quietly, his voice calm despite the chaos of the situation. "Just in case." Relief flooded through me as Jason accepted the rings, a brief but grateful smile crossing his face. The moment was a reminder of how much we had already faced together. Even in the face of the unexpected, we had each other, we were in this together. As we exchanged rings, the guests stood in silent admiration, their eyes filled with something I hadn't expected. Respect. Not just for the ceremony itself, but for the way Jason and I had handled the challenges that had threatened to tear us apart. We weren't perfect, but we were real. And in that moment, that was enough. When Pastor Mitchell pronounced us husband and wife, the room erupted into applause, and I felt the weight of the day shift. The tension that had once felt unbearable now seemed distant, and in its place, there was only a profound sense of triumph. We had done it. We had stood up to adversity, to Margaret, to every obstacle that came our way, and we had come out stronger. As we walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, I couldn't help but smile. Jason squeezed my hand, his expression full of pride, his eyes shining with love. "You did it," he whispered. "We did it." And I realized as we made our way toward the reception hall that this wasn't just a wedding. It was a testament to everything we had been through, everything we had overcome, and everything we would continue to face together. No matter what happened next, we would always have each other. And that was the greatest victory of all. We weren't just surviving this day, we were thriving, stronger than ever. And nothing, no one, could take that away from us. The reception was a blur of faces, laughter, and congratulations. The Grand Pavilion's ballroom, once a place filled with a cold formality that seemed to define Jason's family, now hummed with something more genuine. It wasn't just a celebration of our wedding, it was a celebration of overcoming the impossible. There was an air of defiance now, a subtle rebellion against the rigid expectations that had so long controlled Jason's world. As we entered the ballroom, the applause from the guests felt different. It wasn't the polite clapping of society's expectations, but the sound of people recognizing something real, something true. Jason's father, Richard, stood near the entrance, his face filled with pride as he saw us. The tension between him and Margaret had not only been visible but palpable, and it was clear now that he too was breathing a sigh of relief. I couldn't help but notice the absence of some familiar faces. Margaret's country club friends, those who had always surrounded her, now gone. It was as though they had quietly slipped away in the wake of the drama, leaving space for something else to grow in their place. And in that void, the people who truly mattered, my friends, Jason's friends, and the family members who had always supported us, moved closer, their faces glowing with admiration. Jason and I made our way to the center of the room, his arms securely around my waist. The soft music that had been playing earlier seemed to fade into the background as our guests turned their attention toward us. We stopped for a moment, letting the noise of the room wash over us. I could feel the weight of the day still heavy on my shoulders, but in this moment, I was no longer alone in it. "How do you feel?" Jason asked, his voice soft, as he looked at me with a smile that made my heart flutter. I leaned into him, resting my head on his shoulder, allowing myself to relax for the first time all day. I feel like I've just won a battle, I replied with a half laugh, half sigh. I didn't think we'd make it through all of that, but here we are, we made it. Jason chuckled, his thumb gently brushing across the back of my hand. I don't think there was ever any doubt, he said. You're stronger than you know. I wasn't sure if I had believed that myself, not until today. But hearing it from him, knowing he truly believed in me, made something shift inside of me. It was a shift I didn't even know I needed. For so long I had questioned whether I could ever be enough for Jason, whether I could ever truly belong in his world. But today, I had learned that belonging wasn't about fitting into a mold. It was about standing together, no matter what anyone else thought. And that's what we had done. The evening continued with laughter, speeches, and toasts. Jason's best man, Tom, stood up and made a joke about the wedding dress fiasco, drawing a laugh from the crowd, but there was an underlying sentiment in his words that touched me deeply. You both have shown us that love isn't about perfection, it's about resilience, about standing by each other when things don't go according to plan. I smiled as I looked at Jason, who was now standing by my side, his hand warm in mine. Yeah, no one's gonna forget this wedding anytime soon, I said, my voice filled with a kind of quiet pride. The chaos of the day had transformed into something meaningful. We had turned a disaster into a victory, and somehow I felt more connected to Jason than ever before. As we danced our first dance, the music swelled around us, and for a brief moment it felt like we were the only two people in the room. Jason held me close, his arms strong and steady, as we swayed to the rhythm of the song. I can't believe we're finally here, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I looked up at him, a playful smile crossing my face. You're telling me, I replied. The way this day started, I never would have imagined we'd end up here, together, dancing in front of everyone. Jason smiled down at me, his eyes soft with affection. I've always known we'd make it here, Val. You and me, we're unstoppable. I felt a warmth spread through me as the words sank in. I had always believed in us, but hearing him say it with such certainty made everything feel real. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. The doubt, the fear, the anxiety that had clouded my mind for so long. In this moment, with Jason in my arms, I felt like I could take on anything. After the dance, we were surrounded by well-wishers. My bridesmaids, Jessica, Tina, and Melody, gathered around me, each of them offering their congratulations with big smiles and laughter. You did it, girl, Jessica said, giving me a quick hug. I don't know how you kept it together, but you did, and you look amazing doing it. I laughed, feeling a sense of gratitude that I hadn't fully realized before. I had a lot of help, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I couldn't have done it without all of you. The night continued to unfold in a whirlwind of joy and celebration. It wasn't the perfect wedding day I had imagined, but in many ways, it was even better. It was ours. It was real. And it was a testament to everything we had already faced together, and everything we would continue to face in the future. As the night drew on, I caught a glimpse of Jason's father, Richard, talking quietly with some of the other guests. His demeanor had changed. There was a quiet respect in his posture now that hadn't been there earlier. It was as if he, too, had seen something in Jason and me, a strength he hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't just about wealth or social status, it was about integrity, loyalty, and love. And that was something no amount of money or status could replace. Later, Jason and I found ourselves at a quiet table in the corner of the ballroom, taking a moment to catch our breath. The celebration was in full swing around us, but for a few minutes, it was just the two of us. Jason took my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles, and a soft smile spread across his face. You okay? He asked, his voice low and tender. I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion. Yeah, I'm more than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Jason's smile deepened, and he leaned in to kiss me gently. I love you, Val, more than you'll ever know. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the warmth of his words wash over me. I love you too, I whispered. I always will. As we sat there together, watching the world continue around us, I realized that this moment, this imperfect, messy, beautiful moment, was exactly what I had always dreamed of, not because it was flawless, but because it was ours, and no one could ever take that away from us. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new hurdles to overcome, but tonight we had made it. Together. And that was more than enough. This was just the beginning, and the best was yet to come. The days following our wedding were a whirlwind. The honeymoon was a brief escape to the Maldives, a paradise of sun and sand, where the reality of what had happened at the wedding felt like a distant memory. But even in that tranquil place, the weight of the world, both the good and the bad, still lingered. Our phones buzzed incessantly with messages, notifications, and emails, all stemming from the drama that had unfolded in front of so many eyes. When we first arrived, we had been overwhelmed by the flood of support from our friends, family, and even strangers. News outlets had picked up the viral story of our wedding, how it had gone from an elegant affair to a battlefield, only to end in a triumphant display of resilience and love. Articles had been written, interviews had been requested, and social media had exploded with hashtags like Phoenix Wedding and Can't Burn Love. Jason and I spent our days on the beach, trying to let it all sink in, trying to find a moment of peace amidst the chaos. But the questions were relentless. People wanted to know our story, wanted to hear about how we had managed to come out on top, despite the sabotage that had nearly ruined everything. And while part of me was proud of how we had handled it all, another part of me longed for a simpler time, a time before Margaret's cruelty had entered our lives. We found comfort in each other's company. There were no cameras, no reporters, no expectations, just Jason and me, and the promise that we would always have each other, no matter what. Still, when we returned home, the reality hit hard. Jason's family had been forever changed by the events of the wedding, and Margaret's absence left a hole that I wasn't sure how to fill. Jason and his father Richard had barely spoken since that day. Richard had insisted on keeping a low profile while dealing with the fallout from Margaret's actions, but it was clear that things would never be the same between them. As we returned to Cleveland, I found myself constantly navigating the aftermath of that day. I wasn't sure how to act around Jason's family anymore. His relatives, many of whom had remained silent during the chaos, were now reaching out, attempting to apologize for their lack of support. It was strange to have people who had once seen me as an outsider suddenly trying to embrace me. But I couldn't ignore the fact that it was all happening because of what had unfolded on that wedding day. Jason and I had talked about Margaret, of course. We had discussed her behavior and how it had affected both of us. But it wasn't until we were back in Cleveland that I realized how deeply the situation had impacted him. He had been trying to keep things together, trying to shield me from the worst of it. But I could see the strain in his eyes, the weight of the decision he had made. Choosing me over his mother hadn't come without cost. "I never thought it would come to this," Jason said one night, as we sat on the couch in our apartment, the lights dimmed, the quiet of the evening wrapping around us like a blanket. "I always thought Mom would come around. I thought she'd accept us eventually. But now it feels like there's no going back." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Jason, you did what you had to do, and I'm so proud of you for standing by me. No one should have to choose between family and love. But you made the right choice, for both of us." He nodded, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "I don't want to lose my family, Val. I really don't. But it feels like everything's different now. It's like I can't go back to the way things were, and I don't know how to fix it." I could feel his heartache, and it hurt to see him like this. He was so caught between the love he had for me and the loyalty to a family that had never truly accepted me. He wanted to make things right, but I didn't know if there was a way to fix the cracks that had formed. "I understand," I said softly. "It's hard, but we'll get through it, Jason. You and me, together, we'll find a way." The next few weeks were a mix of difficult conversations and awkward family gatherings. Margaret's absence was a constant elephant in the room. Jason had tried calling her a few times, but each attempt had ended in frustration and anger on both sides. The gulf between them seemed wider than ever. And no matter how much Jason wanted things to return to normal, I could tell that his relationship with his mother was irreparably changed. Despite all the tension, there were moments of growth between Jason and me. We found new rhythms in our life together. new ways to navigate the complexities of being newlyweds in a world that seemed to be constantly testing us. We had a newfound appreciation for the strength we shared, for the fact that we had faced something that would have torn other couples apart, and come out the other side stronger. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that the fallout from the wedding wasn't just affecting Jason and me, it was affecting everyone around us. Even my own family, who had once been so supportive, began to feel the strain. I could tell that they too were worried about the long-term consequences of what had happened, the way it had rippled out into the world. My sister, who had been deployed overseas, had sent me a message that still haunted me. "I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right, Val, but I hope you're ready for the fallout. People like Margaret don't back down easily." I wanted to believe that everything would settle in time, that we would find our way through this and come out stronger. But there was a part of me that feared what was coming next. I could see the cracks in Jason's family, feel the tension in the air whenever we were around his relatives, and I wasn't sure if there would ever be a time when we could put the pieces back together. But as we continued on our journey, I reminded myself of one simple truth. Jason and I were in this together. We had made it through the hardest parts already. We had faced what felt like insurmountable odds and still chose each other, still stood side by side. That was the foundation we would build on. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we could face them, as long as we faced them together. But there was something else too. Margaret had left a mark on all of us, on everything around us. And while I wasn't sure how, I knew that her attempts to destroy our love had only made it stronger. The fire she tried to set had only forged a bond between Jason and me that nothing would ever break. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what was to come. I was ready for whatever challenges the world would throw at us, because we had already proved that we could handle anything. Together. Months passed, and the dust from the wedding had settled into something more familiar. The initial shock and the intense emotions were behind us, but the aftermath of Margaret's actions lingered in the background like an unresolved chord. The fallout from the wedding, the divided loyalties in Jason's family, and the ongoing tension between us all had not disappeared, but we had found a way to live with it. More importantly, we had found a way to move forward. Jason and I had made our peace with the changes. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of frustration and quiet sorrow when we thought about how things used to be with his family. I could see that Jason missed the version of his family that had once been intact, the version of his life that had been simpler, less complicated. But he had never once wavered in his commitment to me, and for that I was eternally grateful. We had become experts at navigating the delicate balance between our love and the lingering fractures of Jason's family dynamics. There were phone calls, some of them strained and awkward, from relatives who were slowly reaching out. The first time Jason spoke to his father after the wedding, there was a heaviness in the air that neither of them could deny. But slowly conversations began to shift. They spoke of other things, about the business, about the family foundation, about normal everyday things. The elephant in the room, Margaret, was still there, but they were learning to dance around her. But what struck me the most was how Jason had begun to change. Not in any outward way, but in his mindset. For the first time, I saw him make peace with his decision. He had spent so many months questioning whether he had done the right thing. He had been haunted by the idea that he had torn his family apart, that he had chosen me over his own flesh and blood. But with each passing day, he seemed to accept that the choice he had made was the right one. Not because it had been easy, but because it had been honest. We were no longer just surviving our circumstances, we were finding a way to thrive, together. There was a quiet evening a few months after our wedding, when Jason and I were sitting on the balcony of our apartment, watching the sunset. It had become one of our favorite things to do, just sit, talk, and let the world go by. The noise of the city was always present in the background, but in that moment, it felt distant, as if we were in our own little bubble, untouched by the complications that had once threatened to break us. Jason turned to me, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He said thoughtfully, I think I've finally figured it out. Figured what out? I asked, raising an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. I've been so worried about what everyone else thinks, about how we're supposed to fit into their world. But the truth is, I don't care anymore. I care about us. I care about what we've built together. I felt a surge of warmth in my chest. This wasn't the man who had walked into that bridal suite, struggling with doubts about his family. This was the man I had always known he could be, the one who had the strength to fight for us no matter what. You've always cared about us, I said, my voice gentle but firm. You've just had to find your own way of showing it. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. I guess I just needed to see it clearly. We've been through so much already, and we made it through. We're still here, and we're stronger than ever. I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. We are. And in that moment, I knew that the battle with Margaret, though it had hurt us in so many ways, had ultimately pushed us closer together. It had forged a bond between Jason and me that nothing could break. Not her, not anyone. A few weeks later, we received an unexpected invitation. It was from Jason's father, Richard, and it wasn't just a casual dinner or a family gathering. It was an invitation to a formal event, the Wilson Family Foundation's annual gala, an event that had traditionally been orchestrated by Margaret. The invitation itself was a subtle shift. Richard had always been at the helm of the family business, but Margaret had controlled the social calendar, the events, the people who mattered in their circle. But this time, Richard had taken charge. The event was set to take place at the Cleveland Art Museum, and as Jason and I discussed it, it was clear that this was more than just a social obligation. It was a statement. Richard was trying to rebuild, to reshape the family dynamic in a way that could accommodate both Jason and me. I think it's time we go back to facing this head-on, Jason said, his voice steady, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. This is more than just a party. It's a chance to show them that we're not going anywhere, that we've made our own place in this family. I could see the conflict in his eyes. The idea of facing the extended family, many of whom had stayed loyal to Margaret, was daunting. But I understood what he meant. It wasn't about making them like me or even accepting me. It was about making our own space in the world we had chosen together. We didn't need their approval, but we could show them that we weren't going to let their judgments control our lives. Jason, I said softly, taking his hand in mine, we've already faced the hardest part, and we're still here. No matter what happens, we have each other. He looked at me then, a slow smile spreading across his face. I know, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The night of the gala arrived, and as we walked into the museum, I couldn't help but feel a little nervous. The grandeur of the event, the elegance of the surroundings, the soft chatter of the guests, it all felt so overwhelming. But as I looked at Jason beside me, I realized that the moment wasn't about the glitz or the glamour. It was about the two of us, facing this new chapter together. Jason's father greeted us with a warm embrace, his smile genuine, though there was still a quiet sadness in his eyes. You both look wonderful, he said, his voice soft. I'm proud of you for being here tonight. I could tell that Richard had made his peace with the changes, and in some way I had, too. The past few months had been about finding a new equilibrium, about redefining what family meant in the wake of Margaret's departure. And tonight it felt like we were all moving forward, together, but separately. The evening passed without incident. There was no confrontation, no awkward moments with Margaret's side of the family. In fact, it was the most peaceful gathering I had attended since the wedding. There were moments of awkwardness, sure, and I could still feel the lingering tension between Jason and some of his relatives. But there was also something else. Respect. Not the forced kind that had once been expected, but the kind that comes with time, understanding, and a shared sense of experience. As the night came to a close, Jason and I stood together at the edge of the dance floor, watching the guests mingle. The soft strains of music played in the background, and for the first time in a long while it felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Do you think we're finally going to be okay? I asked quietly, leaning into him. Jason squeezed my hand, his voice full of certainty. I think we're more than okay, Val. We're exactly where we're supposed to be, together. And in that moment, I knew he was right. We had faced the impossible and come through it stronger. No more questions, no more doubts, only us and the future we were ready to build, together. The months that followed the gala marked a new chapter in our lives, one that felt less like surviving and more like living. Jason and I had finally found our footing, not just as a couple, but as individuals who had learned to embrace our own strengths and the bond we shared. The past had shaped us, but it no longer defined us. We had built something stronger in its place. Jason's relationship with his father Richard had become more genuine, though it wasn't without its struggles. They spoke more openly now, no longer tiptoeing around the elephant in the room, Margaret. And although Jason's relationship with his extended family remained strained, there was a quiet understanding between us that we didn't need their approval to be happy. Our life was ours to shape. Our work lives, too, began to settle into something more comfortable. Jason's involvement in the family business had grown, but it was clear that he was carving his own path, one that was less about maintaining appearances and more about doing what felt right. I had expanded my role at the advertising agency, using the attention the wedding had brought to leverage new opportunities for growth and creative projects. It wasn't just a career anymore, it was my passion, my way of contributing to something meaningful. But even with all the progress we had made, there was still something that lingered in the back of my mind. Despite everything we had overcome, the deep wounds left by Margaret's betrayal remained. I had learned to live with the tension between Jason and his family, but it wasn't something I could forget. Sometimes I found myself wondering if Jason had truly let go of the resentment, or if, deep down, he still felt torn between the family he loved and the woman who had nearly torn us apart. It was a question I didn't know how to ask, but one evening, as we sat together in our apartment, the quiet between us felt heavy. Jason had been distant that afternoon, his mind occupied with something I couldn't quite reach. He had been staring out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, his expression unreadable. "Jason?" I said softly, breaking the silence. "What's on your mind?" He looked at me, his brow furrowed. "I was just thinking about everything that happened, about what's next for us. It feels like things are finally settling, but I keep wondering if I've really made peace with it. With her." I felt a tightness in my chest, a mixture of empathy and sadness. I don't think you ever fully make peace with something like that. It changes you. It changes the way you see people. But that doesn't mean it defines you. You're not your mother, Jason, you're you. His eyes softened and he moved to sit next to me, taking my hand in his. "I know, and you're right. I think part of me was waiting for things to just fall into place, for the pain to just go away. But it doesn't work like that, does it?" "No," I replied, my voice quiet but steady. "It doesn't, but we're stronger than we were. We've already shown that we can face the worst together." Jason nodded slowly, the weight of his thoughts lifting just a little. "I never thought that day would shape us the way it did. I never thought I'd end up here, facing my own family, my own past, and all of it wrapped around you. But you know what? I wouldn't change it. Not for anything." The rawness of his words struck me. For so long, he had carried the burden of being the good son, trying to appease his mother, trying to fit into a world that had never truly accepted him. But in that moment I realized just how far he had come, how far we both had come. "I'm proud of you," I whispered, squeezing his hand. "You've done more than just survive this. You've chosen us, and that's everything." Jason turned to face me, his expression full of love and gratitude. "I've always chosen you, Val. Always." We sat there in silence for a while, not needing words to fill the space. There was something quiet and profound about the way we were simply there, together, existing in the same moment. It felt like we had passed through something difficult, and we had made it out the other side, not just intact but stronger. We had grown, both as individuals and as partners. We had built something real. A few weeks later, we found ourselves back at the Cleveland Art Museum. This time, not for a gala, but for a different kind of celebration. The Wilson Family Foundation had chosen to honor a new initiative, the Rising Phoenix Grants, an initiative inspired by our wedding story, our journey of resilience and strength in the face of adversity. It wasn't just about us anymore. It was about helping others who had faced challenges in their lives. Women who had fought through personal battles, struggled with toxic relationships, and had come out stronger on the other side. Jason and I were asked to speak at the event. It felt surreal, standing in front of a crowd that was now celebrating not just our love, but the lessons we had learned along the way. We had turned our painful experience into something meaningful, something that could help others. As I stood on the stage beside Jason, looking out over the crowd of guests, some familiar faces from our wedding, others new, but all of them eager to hear our story, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. We had overcome the worst of what life had thrown at us, and now we were sharing that strength with others. It wasn't just about a viral wedding disaster anymore, it was about building something real, something that could inspire. Jason spoke first, his voice strong and clear as he shared our story with the. When Valerie and I faced the toughest challenge of our lives, we never imagined it would lead us here. But we've learned that true strength doesn't come from avoiding the hard times. It comes from facing them head-on together and coming out on the other side stronger. That's what love is. It's not about perfection, it's about resilience. The applause that followed felt like a release, as though everyone in that room was sharing in our triumph. It was no longer just our story, it had become a collective story. A story of strength, resilience, and love. After the event, Jason and I stood together, taking in the night air outside the museum. The city lights sparkled, and for the first time in a long while I felt like everything was in its right place. Our journey had been long, and it hadn't always been easy, but we had made it through, stronger and more united than ever. You know, I said quietly, I think this is just the beginning. There's so much more we can do, so much more we can build, together. Jason smiled, his arm around me as we walked into the future. I couldn't agree more. Whatever comes next, we'll face it the same way we faced everything else, together. And with that, I knew we were ready for whatever came next. Together, we had already proven that nothing could stop us, not even the flames of the past. The future was ours to create, and we were more than ready.